So, this is an attempt at a sports show.
Yeah, in general, I didn't want to make it too football specific because we might branch out and get guests. People want to talk about other things.
Right. Although, really, we haven't been paying much attention to anything but football for. Yeah. I mean, we used to be.
The World Series is over. Last night or Monday night. Yeah, Monday night the World Series is over.
Yeah.
Go Giants. So,
yeah.
Anyway, I guess it was some sort of Cinderella story for Detroit, but baseball's a hard sport for me to watch as I gotten older. But what we're here to talk about today?
We are here to talk about the Broncos, our favorite team, and the AFC West.
The anemic AFC West.
The anemic AFC West, yes. And speaking of anemia, one of the things that I've been, kind of getting out of the sports blogosphere is that a lot of sports writers believe that this NFL season is a tale of a few flawed but very strong contenders and a lot of very weak also rans. That there are about 5 teams maybe in the NFC, 4 or 5, 4.5 teams in the AFC. But a whole lot of kind of bottom feeding going on this year.
Yeah, it does really seem like that. It doesn't seem to be like a really strong division that has a lot of competitors inside of it. Like traditionally, we've talked about this. The NFC East, for example, for years and years and years was the team, the division that puts somebody in the playoffs pretty much without fail, right?
Exactly.
Do we not really have that this year?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that there is one single team that I would say, and this is despite Atlanta, having I think still the lone undefeated record.
Yes.
But
they're in the NFC South, which right now outside of them is just that they've got nobody.
They've already played so far. We're 8 games into the season for some teams. They've played 3 of those games have been against AFC West teams, which are incredibly weak. And the net effect of it is that I'm not really sure if their record is strong enough to really have me hyperventilating over a 16-0 season and a Super Bowl win.
No. I mean, well, you look at who they've beaten, too. I mean, not that they're not a good team. I mean, I've seen them play pretty much every AFC West team they've gone through, which is they've already rolled the AFC West. I mean, they've beaten every team there. They look good. I mean, they are good, but it's hard to measure, I think, in the NFL or any professional sport, the worth of your team when you're playing has-beens and Tier B, Tier C teams. They caught the Broncos at the start of the season,
right? And
I think Manning was nervous, and I don't know if that game was representative of where the Broncos really were even at that moment, much less where they are today. But yeah, so they've got 3 of their wins off the weak sisters in. Actually, they've gotten 4 of their wins. I apologize.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, if we could, roll ourselves a retry on the Falcons Broncos game,
right?
Have them play today. I'm still not sure the Broncos would necessarily win, but it wouldn't have been the mugging that game was.
Sure. Well, and even that game, I mean, looking back at it, I think it's obviously the low point of the season for the Broncos.
Right.
They start off, here's our brand new quarterback. And he just proceeds to throw picks. I mean, we're talking Tebow style picks. I mean, those first 3 interceptions, those weren't good passes.
No, we're not fans of Tebow.
We are
not fans of Tebow.
Bad Tebow, bad. But they almost won that game in spite of themselves. In fact, every game that they've lost this season, the 3 games they've lost, they've almost won it in spite of themselves. Mm-hmm. And the Broncos offense, when it's not throwing interceptions, and I'm not going to blame that all on Manning. There have been plays, and the media's been all over this, where receivers ran the wrong routes to what Manning expected them to do. But the 3 games we lost is because of a lot of early first quarter mistakes.
Yes.
And we spent the rest of the game climbing out of the hole. And interestingly enough, the offense has, in every game, been pretty amazing with the exception of the first half in 3 games.
Well, let me state the obvious here. If in doing an analysis on the Broncos, the problem is not the offense.
No. Well, today. Yes.
It seems pretty clear in retrospect that Manning and the offense have had to go through a kind of season-long learning and adjustment cycle.
Sure.
Everybody had a question at the beginning of the season if Manning was, Mr. Glass. If he was going to break on his first, the first time getting sacked. Exactly. I mean, the first time he took a sack, I literally was waiting for the gurney to come out there and cart him off the field.
Oh yeah, it didn't.
And I think he had those worries too. I mean, besides which he had what, a 14-month layoff, 16-month layoff, something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was obviously a lot of rust, but still, at no point this season can I really say, aside from a lot of sloppy mistakes, like for example the Chargers game, and that first half of just mistake after mistake after mistake. When their mind is in the game, and that seems to be the issue, when their mind is in the game, then they're golden. There's enough talent on the squad. There are enough of the pieces gelling together from one game to the next. It just seems to be that that they get or have gotten off to slow starts. The exception, though, have been the last
one game.
Well, the last one game. Thank you. That's right. For some reason, the Chargers game feels like it was much earlier in the season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way they were playing on Sunday Night Football was the last 6 quarters. The Broncos have been brilliant. I think you can build on that. I mean,
now, by the way, so, I did looking up some statistics because one of the things that we've been talking about are some holes in the team right now. Offensively, they rank in the top 10 in just about every offensive category. This is based on NFL.com stats.
Okay. Does that include the running game?
With the exception of the running game. The running game is ranked 14th.
Okay.
But the thing about it is that in terms of the yards,
yards per carry when they are running it.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it doesn't surprise me. When you're down 20 points, the running game kind of vanishes. It just has to.
Now, of course, we have, amongst ourselves, had no end of discussion about the problems in the defense, right?
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. Accumulating, we're, 8 games into the season now,
This
right?
is the end of week 8.
Okay, end of week 8.
So we've played 7.
We played 7
we've had
with
our
a bye.
Yes.
Okay, so in 7 games, despite a lot of wobbly play through the year on the defense, including a rush defense that we'll go on in a minute, kind of go off on. But basically, they're ranked number 8 in terms of yards per games allowed. Okay. They're ranked 8 in yards per game allowed for passing, and number 15 on yards per game allowed on rushing.
Okay.
So the thing about it is that they're in the upper half of the league, which is interesting. Where they fall apart, though, is they're 20th on allowed third down conversions.
They do have a hard time getting off the field.
And
on some ridiculous third downs, too. I mean, teams are picking up third and longs, third 10, third 15. It seems like too regularly.
Yes.
And something else, again, we'll jump into more detail on this in a second. In fact, why don't we just...
let's just jump into it.
Why don't we just jump right into it? Let's talk defense. I mean, I think that's... When I look at the Broncos and I say, well, where are they? They bad. Offense, they're pretty close. I think they could use a running back. But let's
I don't know. I love McGahee.
He's good, but he's one guy. Let's talk defense. Yeah, the defense, it seems like they always come to the game the first half with the wrong game plan. Like they don't know what team they're playing, and they spend the first half pretty much getting routed. Now there have been exceptions to that. They held on, in a couple of cases where the offense really put them in a bad spot over and over and over again. Just like last year with Tebow, where they just constantly had to do their best with what they had. But it does seem like, especially in the running defense end of things, that they just don't show up with any plan at all to stop the running back they're playing.
Yeah, and it is really surprising, yes. The first half, they seem to be there with the wrong plan. But in their favor, they often, I think in every game this year, they've shown a significant degree of adjustment in the second half.
Oh, absolutely. And that's obviously that's coaches making adjustments. And then, and again, from the outside, it's always hard to tell. we get to watch the game on on TV for the most part, and you don't see what's going on for and a lot of times for package changes, formation changes, personnel sliding in and out of the field, what's really happening in the metagame of football, not the play on the field, but the things that lead up to it.
Right.
So it's a real question in my mind whether other coaches having a lot of experience with Del Rio as a head coach know basically what he likes to call, and they so basically it's I know that that I know, and they're coming out with a game plan that he doesn't expect week after week after week. It's certainly possible, but we've now played 7 games. Now the New Orleans games last Sunday night, yes, New Orleans didn't run it very well against the Broncos, but they don't run it very well against anybody.
They're a mid-ranked team.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cheerleading squad is what they try to run against in practice, and they don't do very well against that. They just stink at running. They've got some definite offensive line issues as far as punching holes for the running backs to make their moves. And quite frankly, they picked up a running back. To jump over to their team here for a second, to excuse New Orleans from when we're talking about defense here, why the run isn't a factor for them. They drafted that guy first a few years ago, and it's almost like they got to hand the ball off to that guy to justify his paycheck. But he's just not very good in general. And you got Drew Brees, who can throw it ridiculous amounts per game and to be really successful. So leaving aside the New Orleans game, which they had no real intent of being serious about running.
And let's realize, guys, we're talking about a Drew Brees who has far and away surpassed Johnny Unitas's record for consecutive number of touchdown passes per game. He's now at 50. I mean, it's taken 30 years for that record to be broken. 40 years.
Sure.
And it'll probably be another 40 years before Drew Brees' new record is broken.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of
one out though in the Broncos game. That could have been.
Well, that is true.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that as far as their run game, they're so dependent upon Drew Brees' pass game that there's really not much of an incentive for them to have a hell of a run game.
No, but you can look at that. You can look at again, not to excuse the opponent here, but you can look at New Orleans with a great passing quarterback and say, well, what other teams in history have kind of had that pattern? Oh, that's right, the Indianapolis Colts,
right,
with Peyton Manning.
Right.
They would just pass the crap out of the ball, and they would just hand it off to whoever was behind them. And there were some great Indianapolis Colt running backs, but a lot of that success, quite frankly, was the fact that the linebackers and safeties were back in the end zone every play. I mean, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but they were way off the line of scrimmage. So in that case, the Colts would use the pass to make the run a successful part of their offense. Well, you would think the same thing could happen with the Saints. Hey, we can pass the ball every play. It forces the secondary away from the line of scrimmage. We should be able to run it.
Right.
But they can't.
But now bringing this back to the Broncos.
Bring it back to the Broncos.
Because, the biggest beef, actually the two biggest beefs that John and I think have had about the Broncos this year have been about the defense and specifically their run defense. And then, of course, not being able to shut down enough plays to get past the third quarter to, basically get more 3-and-outs and get Peyton Manning on the field. Now, so as great as this win was against Drew Brees, the thing about it is that the Broncos, basically, New Orleans was playing against the Broncos' strength.
Yes.
And they lost as a consequence. If they had had more of a run game, it might have been a different story.
Yeah, or at least the threat of a run. I mean, Broncos, I didn't think played a very honest run defense that entire game.
Now, what do you think is the biggest problem, though, with the Broncos' run defense? What didn't get exposed in the New Orleans game?
The Broncos do have some good edge rushers right now on the field.
Particularly in the linebackers. But I don't think anybody takes them terribly seriously. There are teams that you scheme against and players you scheme against. I'll just whip out the Vikings and Jared Allen, for example. Everybody's got to account for Jared Allen, right,
on every play. And that changes how the offensive line has to line block. I think most teams come in looking at the Broncos, if they're running a healthy offensive line, they don't have, rookies or whatever sitting in the gaps. They just scheme it on a one-on-one. We don't have to treat anybody particularly special, except for maybe the linebackers. And I think that's a problem. I don't think any offense in the league, any healthy offensive line in the league, fears the Broncos' front three.
I agree. And a great disappointment for me is last year the Broncos were like, the Berlin Wall against the rush. And they were really a lesser squad last year than this year. They were playing above their abilities. I don't understand, with all the acquisitions that were done in the postseason and in the preseason. I don't understand why things are as they are. But one of the things that does bother me is that I think they're really relying too much on Dumervil and Von Miller. Wow.
Van Miller, that's good.
Miller. Yes, Van Miller.
Van Miller and Christmas Vacation.
Right. I think they're relying too much on Von Miller in particular. I notice him lining up in basically a DE spot on either side, of the front three on a regular basis. He seems to be the primary edge rushing tool, and I think that's a problem actually. But as great of a talent as he is, I mean, I just am amazed by the 1-2 punch we have in the linebacker corps. But the problem is that part of what makes those guys great is that they're a little bit on the small side and very fast.
Yes, and they can get pushed around a bit.
And they do get pushed around a bit. And the thing about it is that they really. I thought that their right defensive end was going to be the position where they were going to be able to launch a much stronger defense this year, but there seems to be kind of a revolving door going on there, a kind of let's make a deal kind of thing from play to play, and I think that's really the downfall on the Broncos defense. Right?
Well, I mean that's the thing with the 3-4. I mean on the 3-4, you only have 3 down linemen, and traditionally most teams will bring in that linebacker somewhere in the package,
sure.
Especially if the backfield is looking strong with 2 tailbacks. Or heavy on the tight ends. I mean, it's a run-ish looking formation. They'll bring that extra guy down, but when it's always the same guy, it takes the mystery out of it. And again, if your edge rushers are containable in single coverage or on single blocks, the tackles are going to be able to take care of those guys, and then the edge rushers can be picked up by guards that slide a little further out. In other words, you're not going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback very quickly. And
looking at some of the other statistics, I mean, the Broncos are definitely able to develop some pressure. Statistically, there's signs of it, but sacks are suffering. They're not put, except on some of the weakest opponents we've faced this year,
sure.
like I think Oakland. We had the Palmer on his back quite a bit.
Or the rare game that were really far ahead, the end of the Chargers game, where they didn't have to respect the run at all.
Yes,
they could just run at the quarterback every play. There was no zone or alignment or line.
Right.
You didn't have to respect any kind of alignments. They just ran right at the quarterback every play.
Right.
And they got a couple sacks out of that. So
so it's kind of artificially padded,
absolutely,
really,
yeah,
because it's garbage time.
Yeah.
In terms of the rest of the defensive squad, though, I mean, Champ Bailey's playing the way Champ Bailey always plays.
Porter's coming back next week, probably.
Yeah, actually, I read this morning he's still out.
He's still going to be out. Okay.
He's still out. But, they've got 2 young guys whose name I can't remember right now who are, both filling in on the quarterback corner position. And then that safety, Harris, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Harris seems to be doing a great job. I mean, he had the standout game there, against the Chargers. Bottom line is that he seems to have continued playing at a high level, and I think possibly, 2 games does not a great NFL career make, but it seems to me like some of these young guys in the corner and safety positions are showing some real promise.
Yeah. No,
So
I think, I definitely think that they are. The secondary has definitely shown a lot of improvements. I thought, there's a couple games I thought they were playing very soft defenses in places where they probably should have been a little more aggressive.
Right.
And that again, it's really hard to tell as an outsider, especially a fan who has no media connections whatsoever, what's really going on there.
Yeah.
Who's really, who's playing hurt.
We need media connections.
Yes.
I would like a press pass. Thank you.
I just want to interject something here.
Yes.
Denver Broncos, your website doesn't work in Chrome, and this is somewhat irritating. So could you guys fix that? None of the links work. Nothing's working. So I'm just trying to pull up the defensive starting formation. And anyway, you write a website that maybe should be able to be used by everybody who uses the internet. Anyway, Okay, so I think we can wrap up the defense. I think, yes, I agree. There's room for improvement. I think they are improving, though. Or at least, the last couple of games seems like they're doing a better job. Listen, we've got new coaches. We've got new staff. The Broncos as an organization, since the Shanahan era has ended, have gone through an enormous number of changes on a seasonal basis. In fact, quite frankly, season, mid-season, season every year.
Well,
so if it takes them a while to settle down, even if it takes them the defense the whole season to settle down, but at the end of the year they're playing consistent good football, then I'm not in panic like, oh my God, we've got the 32nd defense in the league and this is a huge problem, we need to fire it.
I mean, consider, the stars Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker. They've played under 3 different quarterbacks. They've played for Orton and, playing... Sorry, Kyle.
Yes. I was going to wear a jersey today, actually.
Playing for Orton is like playing, afternoon flag football, in the neighborhood. Because you kind of run a route and you kind of catch a fluttering pass,
Yes,
and that's what those poor guys learned in their rookie season.
Absolutely.
Tebow was such an awful passer that basically it was a scramble. Your zone for catching a pass might be 20-yard diameter circle.
Right.
So, that's what they learned.
20 yards, that's all?
Okay, yes, I'm being generous.
Yeah.
Hey, the bottom line is that I really consider this to be the first year that Decker and Thomas...
I'm going to throw it past you. Whoops, I missed.
I needed that pencil. Anyway, I consider this to be the first year that Decker and Thomas...
Tebow pass.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, moving on.
Yes, moving on.
Decker, Thomas.
Decker and Thomas. To me, this is the first year that they really get to play like real top-tier, honest-to-God wide receivers.
Right.
They have to run tight routes. As we saw in that interception, 3 games ago, where I forget who it was. It was a rookie that was supposed to run a route. Manning made an adjustment. He blew right through, the option route, and Manning threw an interception because he was expecting a guy to be there when he released the ball.
It was a Sunday night game against the Chargers, and exactly what happened. And the funny thing about that play, I think it was Thomas, I don't want to swear to it, is there was a hand sign that went on between the two of them. They clearly...
It wasn't Thomas, actually.
Was it Thomas?
No.
Okay, whoever it was. There was a hand sign that went on. Clearly, both players knew that there was an adjustment to be made, so that wasn't the thing that was at issue. The thing that was at issue was what adjustment needed to be made. And since we're segueing over to the offense, I think we can break... I'd like to talk about the offense in 2 parts. I'd like to talk about Peyton Manning in and of himself. And I'd also like to talk about the rest of the offense, because Peyton Manning is the new cog in the system, that is the Denver Broncos offense.
The general.
Right.
The sheriff is, as Gruden likes to call him.
Yeah, and I think you've made a good point that these receivers have had to go through some quarterbacks that really aren't terribly great. And you can, look at what's Orton do? Orton's now the backup for the Dallas Cowboys, and sadly enough, the Cowboys might play him next week. Which, if they think they're going to get better than Romo, it's going to be the exact opposite. Romo throws lots of interceptions. Orton will throw lots of balls at people's feet. Interceptions are horrible, but not being able to keep drives alive at the end of the day doesn't win games. And that's always been Orton's problem.
Right.
And then, of course, we have Tebow, which he will be a great H-back, or even, I think he'd make a great tight end. But he is not a quarterback. And you can argue about all the games he won. And every time you do, I'm just going to say, look at the statistics on Tebow. He stinks. Great. The defense has kept him in the games long enough that he can make his one throw that he knows how to make. And God bless the other teams for letting him get away with it. And that's the only reason he had success. Other teams treated him like a real quarterback. And anytime a team showed up that didn't treat him like a real quarterback, the Ravens and New England last year, they got murdered. And I think they played the Ravens last year, but they definitely played the Patriots. And the Patriots murdered them. Why? Because they treated him like a running back, and that game was over in the first 5 minutes.
Right.
So, but I think the real problem with those first 2 guys, I don't believe those 2 guys could teach a wide receiver anything, because they're not very good at their jobs. I'm not sure how you teach other people how to do their jobs. So we get Peyton Manning, and one of the concerns I had when Peyton Manning came here was, as somebody who was invested $0 into the, I'm a $0 owner in the Denver Broncos franchise, and should be treated as such when it comes to these types of decisions. But I felt that Manning, in my opinion, having watched him play football his entire career, had an ego that was 3 stories above his head, and that when things went wrong with Manning, traditional thing he would do was go to the sidelines and start yelling at his offensive line or his receivers all the time. And I said, well, he's going to have bad games here. And we've got, quite frankly, an offensive unit that hasn't really seen any consistency from the quarterbacking or coaching position in years. And I go way back to Shanahan with that, because things were falling apart in the last year or two of Shanahan as well. So I felt that there was a real possibility that no matter how good Manning was, the way that he played football on the field didn't really matter as much as the way he behaved off the field. Well, I saw something, and I've seen it pretty much all season, but they really highlighted it on the Sunday night game against the Saints. After every series, Manning is over there talking to each one of us offensive linemen, and these are after successful series, these are about after unsuccessful series, and saying, here's what we got to do. And that, to me, is a brand new Peyton Manning. And I think maybe he's been humbled.
I would agree. You know what? I think he has been humbled. I think he had, a year and a half to basically contemplate the end of his career and feeling like there was so much unfinished business left on the field. And so, I think he's been humbled by that and really has come to appreciate, the incredible role that, the opportunity that he has to play. And, frankly, I have this theory, again, having no official press credentials. I really think, yes, press credentials right here. I really think that Manning also benefits by having one of the greats of the game being in the front office, John Elway.
Yes.
Because as any ego that might be piled well above Peyton Manning's head is outdone by the 2 quarterback rings that John Elway can show in every discussion. Yes,
look at my Peyton.
Exactly. Look at my rings.
I just want to say, if you want to come to the Broncos,
right?
Yeah, exactly. I believe that there's a lot to that.
And so with that in mind, I mean, we talked about this, a couple of weeks ago. I think that Elway might have sat down Manning and said, "Hey, look, I think 2 quarterback or Super Bowl rings that you really need to be a mentor, through this time, because you've got 3 or 4 good years left. Let's get a couple of Super Bowls, for this team. But when you leave, let's leave this team better than it was." And I think that Elway might have done that. There's something about the way that Peyton Manning's attitude has changed that seems to not entirely be accounted for. The fear of never coming back to football because of his neck, and I mean, yes, he seems grateful. He seems like
a team player.
Yeah, a team player. Yeah, that is awesome. So that's you wanted to talk about 2 things: Manning, and what was the other half of it?
Well, the other half is the offense, and.
the rest of the offense.
The other 10 players.
The other 10 players.
Now, it makes sound kind of silly, but modern football is really driven a lot more from the quarterback position than it ever has been at any point in the past. In ye olden days, and I'm talking about when I first started watching football with Abraham Lincoln and myself, the offensive line set was the offensive line set. You won in, everybody had their line blocked.
You remember the Tennessee Boone Raccoons?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, they were a great team. The great thing is they didn't have helmets, but they had those raccoon things.
Exactly.
And they had the least concussions.
They did.
Of the early National Football League.
It just so happened that the tail would flip around, and when they were, ready to hit, they were live raccoons, by the way. So
Really?
Yeah, they were live raccoons.
I think you're going too far.
I think
So please don't call us PETA and all the rest of the animal organizations. Of course, if I had a live raccoon on my head, it would make me to play as quickly as best as possible, get it off my head. But modern football, the line assignments. Well, let's talk about the old school football that we grew up with in the 70s, the 80s, that kind of thing. In a lesser extent, the 90s. The play was called, in the huddle. And the line assignments were there in the playbook. You do this against this guy. And the most autonomy the quarterback really had was picking up the mic in the package based on any tailbacks he had, or he could bring in a receiver or a tight end behind him to help do that. But there wasn't a lot of work. In modern football, most teams have either the quarterback or the center doing at the line of scrimmage blocking assignments for the entire line. Now, with the Broncos, That's Peyton Manning's job. Manning is the guy doing the bulk of that.
Right.
And that's why we see him on the sideline talking to his centers and guards and tackles and such. But so the line is now part of, for most teams, I'll say, or some teams, it's part of the quarterback's responsibility, where it never really used to be.
Right.
And now, of course, you've got what they call the hand player, the skill players, all the guys who can catch the ball, be handed off the ball. Basically the other 5 guys besides the quarterback that are on the field at one time,
right,
who have always been the quarterback's responsibility. Except in modern football, with all the hot reads and side adjustments that have to be made, that also falls into the quarterback's job. In other words, the quarterback is out there not just, hey, I got my 5 skill guys, and I know, and they do what I tell them to do, which is what we saw, in the 70s and 80s. But now it's, oh, I'm the quarterback. You block, you block, you block, you block, you block, and then, oh, by the way, side adjustment, and you do this new thing, and oh, by the way, it's no longer an 819, it's a 772 or something like that. All this happens in 40 seconds, which is amazing in and of itself. And
nobody does that better than Manning.
And that's the thing. That's Manning. That's what made Manning great with the Colts, is he would do all of these things. And and when he came to the Broncos, we've seen the evolution of that. The offense, I don't think, was ready for what Manning brought to the table for adjustment. And I think Manning, to his credit, didn't try to overload the offense. They came out with that first game. They tried to hurry up and no huddle, but the mistake they made in that first game was they ran the plays as quickly as they could, and that's not the point of the no huddle offense. The point of the no huddle offense is to keep the defense on the field,
right?
But give yourself enough time to set up the offensive line sets that you want and the receiver patterns that you want, based on what you see. It's not running to the line of scrimmage and hiking the ball every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You get 3 or 4 interceptions a game when you try that.
In a way, I felt like Manning in the first, say, 3 games of the season was trying really hard to be Manning. Like, he wasn't being Manning, he was trying hard to be Manning.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to do the no huddle. He was trying to be on-field quarterback, but his vision, he didn't have his the Peyton Manning X-ray vision to diagnose plays. He didn't have the comfort with the ball. Everything just felt kind of lumpy, and so he failed at pretending to be Manning.
Yeah.
And so doing well, so then you have that problem, and then you have the rest of the offense looking to him to be Manning,
right? And
particularly on those no huddle offenses, and them not being used to that. I mean, they've never had, even going back to the Elway era, they've never really had a quarterback like Peyton Manning. In fact, really, who has aside from the Indianapolis Colts, nobody's had a quarterback like Manning.
There are very few teams that run at that pace. The Patriots do,
right?
Sometimes the Steelers will try it, but really it's been the hallmark of the Colts. And other teams like the Patriots kind of got drug into it by seeing how effective it was. But I agree completely.
Well, in any case, I think basically it was too early in the season, with Manning trying to become Manning instead of pretend to be Manning, and with the rest of the offense still trying to figure out how to play with this great quarterback, and having their own questions about whether he was Mr. Glass, whether he was ever going to achieve some semblance of his former greatness. It was too early in the season for some of his, I don't want to call them tricks, but they are kind of tricks. They're the tricky bits of playing against Manning.
Well, it's the
psychological game
of football.
Exactly. So I think it was too early in the season. I think that if the Broncos wanted to do more hurry up offense now, that it would come off much better than it did.
And they have. And they move it in and out of it, I think, a lot more appropriately.
Exactly.
And they have been doing it.
Well, and the funny thing is that kind of relates to the rest of the AFC West. Old Carson Palmer there, with the Raiders. I mean, there are some calls in Raider land for them to go to a pure no-huddle offense, which of course is ridiculous. Nobody runs 60 minutes of no-huddle offense or 30 minutes of no-huddle offense. Sure. I mean, it's horsepucky. But it is interesting that they've actually had some success with that in the last few games. They've actually been able to put some points on the board, but it takes some special conditions.
Yes, and I think it takes conditions, and this is where the Broncos, I think, early season ran into a problem with it. Is there's a huge difference between no pads practice with the practice team as the defense, and running full pads in a game for real. And I think the early confusion that we saw, and it still happens. It still happens. It's the problems are getting smaller and smaller every game. But this is one of these things that I think you only get really good at when you do it full speed.
Right.
The Colts stunk at it when they tried this initially. It took them a long time to spin up to speed on this. Manning was good out of the gate, but it took the team a long time and the coaches to get to that place where everybody was comfortable with this system. And I think the Broncos are really getting there quickly. I think the team, a couple articles already said this, but I'll repeat it and steal from them. But the team is finally, the offensive unit is finally playing up to Manning.
Right.
And Manning, I think, again, to circle back to an earlier conversation, Manning has given them the time to do it. He's not yelling at his offensive lineman for not blocking correctly.
Right.
And it's what I love about new Manning as opposed to new Coke versus
Manning.
old Coke.
Right.
New Manning, when a play goes wrong,
Right.
he looks over to John Fox and he just goes, "That didn't work."
Right.
Let's not do that again.
Right.
Old Manning was angry.
Right.
Because, quite frankly, he had the unit and the skill, and everybody, in sync enough that pretty much, quite frankly, everything the Colts did should have worked. They were such an amazing team at their best. But
well, that is a conversation for another time.
okay, fair enough.
But yes, I mean, he does seem a great deal more reasonably forgiving, realizing that, of course, since he's on average got 60 chances a game to do something, 60 plays,
Right.
That one play more or less is not going to kill you.
No.
Not unless you throw a pick six or something like that, right? And then that's a different story.
Absolutely.
If I had to highlight two worries that I have about the Broncos on offense, I love McGahee. I love McGahee because he churns his feet. He's like the little engine that could.
Sure.
He drags out, another yard or two every time he carries the ball. And I think his average right now is like 5 yards a carry, something like that, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great.
But the worry I have is that I think he may be getting used too much this year.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely.
I'm concerned that he's going to break. And the number 2 and 3. Well, I mean, I think Hillman is. I think Hillman next year is going to be a really good running back. This year he's still a rookie. I see him second guessing his first cuts too often. He has picked up from McGahee, churning the legs, so that's a good thing. And actually, his yards per carry, I think, are over 4.
He's not doing a bad job. I mean, the Broncos traditionally, and this goes all the way back to Shanahan, they've always wanted running backs that are one cut and go running backs.
Sure.
And the guys that they've gotten that aren't doing that, Hillman is certainly an example of that. Also, Marino, I think, is another great example. They're fast, but they're not terribly strong backs. It just doesn't work for the Broncos style of play. And quite frankly, I don't think it works terribly well in the modern NFL. It's the same reason that, Reggie Bush, I don't think, was ever very successful as a running back in the NFL. Is, in college, he was a great space runner. But in the NFL, the further you run sideways, the more guys are going to be beating you by when you finally want to make your cut.
Right.
And they're defenses are just generally too fast for that to work consistently. And so, yes, I think, in fact, the NFL actually extended the trade deadline was today being Tuesday.
Right.
But because of the hurricane, because of Sandy, they've moved it to Thursday. And I actually am surprised that on the wire that the Broncos have not picked up a running back. There are a couple out there that are actually pretty decent quality guys that they could get.
Yeah, drop Marino and plug in another, or I think they're number 3. I forget what his name is. I think he could probably be put down.
Is it Bell? Do we still have him?
I don't remember.
But yeah, he doesn't get a lot of field time, so it's hard to remember.
Unfortunately, Hillman doesn't get a lot of field time either. I mean, I think he's got probably a 5th or a 6th of the downs that McGahee does.
Well, because McGahee is a consistent producer. When you look at it from a coaching perspective and you're talking about conversion percentages, you're going to go with the guy that's going to pick up your 3 or 4 yards that you need, put you in a second and short, or convert that third down for you in a rather consistent manner. Hillman shows flashes of brilliance, like you say. He's a rookie. I don't think he's going to have a breakout season this year, but potentially next year. I also agree that we need a third running back, somebody to pick up the slack, because quite frankly, the Broncos are hard on their running backs. Most teams are.
Yeah.
They have pretty short careers in general, and we definitely need to have somebody there. So let's. Do you want to talk about the individual games next week? Maybe some predictions and some scores.
Really? Yeah, sure. Why not?
I mean, why not? We've been at this a little bit, and it might be a good place to wrap. Unless you got some more stuff you want to talk about.
No. I think I think we have more than covered the Broncos and the division at this point.
Well, let's work our way up from the bottom then. Let's start with the Chiefs. So the Chiefs have Atlanta. Oh, no, it's the first game they played. Ooh, that's not looking good. All right, so next week they have a division game, and it is against the Chargers, and they'll be at the Chargers.
I think that there's a tendency to want to throw that at San Diego and say that it's automatic for San Diego, and I think the answer would be right. But I think that actually that game is going to be more of a nail biter.
You think?
Yes.
I put a score in that one.
A score. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say it's going to be like a 21-10 game,
okay,
or a 21-14.
And you're going to put the Chargers on that one.
I'm going to put Chargers on it.
All right. So the Chargers have lost 2 games. Quite frankly, they should be embarrassed about the Broncos game.
See, I would have that pencil to make a note of my prediction there. Except you Tebowed it off the set.
Give me your glasses. I'll Tebow that too. Anything else you want me to Tebow off the set? The thing is, randomly, one time in 100, it'll hit you.
That's right. And put an eye out.
It'll put your eye out.
And then I'll die.
Yes. So the Chargers have come off 2 tough losses. They had their bye week. They should have come out strong and prepared. 3. That's true. They are getting burned to the ground, aren't they? This last week's game, it's a hard game. Bad weather conditions. You always get fluky games that way. But quite frankly, I thought they would have come out pretty hard after that Broncos game and the bye week. But I think that's a symptom of the rot that is at the center of the organization. I believe it's mostly Philip Rivers. I'm not sure how much of this is Norv Turner as well.
Yes, if it's Rivers, it's a wet rot.
Oh, I get it. If I still had that pencil, I'd be stabbing myself in the forehead right now. So I think, but here's the thing. They'll be going to be playing at home. The fans are going to be mad. And quite frankly, this is a part of the season. This is kind of it's not the second half, it's the game before, but still, when you're a mediocre team not playing well, this is when people are playing for the job. So I think the Chargers are going to destroy the Chiefs, because the Chiefs got their own problems. They've got this quarterback controversy. They're going to be back and forth. Nobody knows who's playing for who. The team's demoralized. I don't think they believe in the coaching staff. 31-13 Chargers, and it won't be close on that. It'll be a blowout in the first half, and any points the Chiefs pick up will be garbage time. All right, so the Raiders they're playing Tampa Bay, and they'll be at home. I'll go first on this one. So Tampa's been a streaky team. Sometimes they actually play really well, but for the most part they haven't been terribly good. And I do believe that, like you said, the Raiders are on their way up. They may not have all the pieces on the field yet, but it's a home game. This is a game, actually, I don't think will be a ton of scoring, just because, like you say, the Raiders have offensive issues as far as quality of people on the field right now. Tampa is just the team going nowhere. Raiders 13-10.
Raiders 13-10. Yeah, you know what? I probably could get behind. I think I would actually go with your call.
Raiders 13-10. We're both on the board for the same thing.
And the thing about it too is that I happen to know someone who works for the Tampa organization, and the stories that have
our one inside source.
Yes, exactly, our one inside source. And I will in no way provide any actual details, but the things that I hear, it's going to be a long time before Tampa Bay becomes anything,
a contender again.
It's sad. It really is sad, because I was so happy for the John Gruden time period, and they're a long ways away from that. Yep. I mean, I saw them play last year against New Orleans, and actually they were different and better last year than they were this year.
Yeah,
they've really fallen off the.
I don't think they've gelled as a unit on either side of the ball. All right, so last up is the Broncos, and they will be at Cincinnati, the perennial bad luck team of the NFL.
Yeah. I would be surprised if Manning doesn't give us, 35 or 40 points on that game.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think I don't know if he's ever lost against the Bengals. The Bengals organization right now again are not a terribly good team, and I don't think the Broncos should have any problem with this. I think this should be one of the give me games on the board for them. So,
well, and again, to me, the takeaway from this game will be whether or not they play down to their opponent or whether they play their game regardless of the opponent. And so, if they play their game, they're going to put in 35 or 40 points against what I don't remember where the Cincinnati is with their defense, but I think it should be fairly porous for them.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I'm going to be looking forward to is whether or not the Broncos' defense can do what they ought to against a weak Cincinnati offense.
that is kind of the wild card with us, isn't it? Right?
It
now?
is. It is. So it's hard to tell whether we're talking about beginning of the season Broncos defense or the current Broncos defense. I'll say though that they're going to give up, say, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So I'll give them 21 points. I'll spot them 21.
So what's your final? 40 something.
Let's say 40 something to 21.
All right.
My math's a little hazy when you get up to those 40 numbers.
No. You know what? I'm going to go something pretty close to last week. So I agree with you. I think the offense, if they keep clicking, again, with football, it's any given Sunday. So every prognosticator has got to go on what they saw last week. Plus injury reports, that kind of thing. And based on the performance over the last few weeks, something similar, to what we did to New Orleans, 34-14. I'll give them. New Orleans is a great team. So. But,
yeah, I just realized I spotted more points for the Bengals than I did for New Orleans.
But the New Orleans is one-dimensional. I don't think the Bengals are quite caught in that trap. So I'm going to say 34-17. We'll keep it reasonably close to the other score.
34-17. All right.
So, but the great thing about this week coming up is 2 division rivals have to play each other. One of them's going to lose, and that sinks one of them further away from us. So that that's just one of the quirks of the schedule. I'd be great to see San Diego lose, but I don't think either one thinks that's going to happen. That would definitely gap us out. I think our only competition is the Chargers right now for far as trying to catch up with us this coming week, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, the funny thing is that if Phillip Rivers and the rest of the team doesn't get their head back in the game, it's going to be the Raiders that are going to be the only threat to us.
Yeah.
Because...
And this is your problem, Chargers. This is every year, You got Boomer out there talking about the Superchargers, but the problem is you don't have a team on the offense. You got a bunch of individuals, and that starts in the locker room with the coaching staff. And as long as that's true, you're not going to win. And that's...
I have to say, too, I'm almost wondering if there's an injury to Rivers that they're not talking about. That this could be some kind of mystery thing that they're trying to keep, on the slide because.
But he plays great, then he plays bad, and it's like if he's got an injury, it comes and goes.
Yeah, but
in the same game, sometimes on the same series. Yeah, I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think we're seeing the same old Phillip Rivers that we always see, and it's just not NFL quality. And NFL quality is what wins you games. Not saying he's not a great quarterback. He can be. He could probably be one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played the game. He could be one of those top 10 guys you talk about forever, but he just hasn't had the maturity, and he doesn't have the leadership. And it's interesting to see, we've got 4 quarterback stories this year in the AFC West. Peyton Manning, who had leadership issues, I would say, being a team player, and he's completely changed that, at least on the surface, and I believe that's a true change. That's not something he's doing to please people. I think he really wants that ring, and for him to get that ring, I think is like we've said, he's had an epiphany of some kind. This is how it's done to win championships.
Right.
You've got the Raiders, who've got a good quarterback, not great. They're building an organization around, and that's a start from that. That puts them on the right path. You've got the Chargers, who has a statistically good quarterback, statistically great quarterback, but it's not a team player, and nobody trusts him. And yeah, I think there's trust issues on the team. This is all supposition, of course, and they're on a downward slope. And then the Chiefs, who change quarterbacks and coaches, it seems like every time I see them play, and organizationally, front to back, I don't think they're going anywhere. I got a question for the league, actually. In a game that you're comfortably winning, like last week's game, is there? Did I say a question for the league?
Yes.
I got a question for the Broncos. I don't have any questions for the league. I have a question for the Broncos. You're playing, you play at home. You're comfortably ahead. You're in a stadium where you can basically kick the football over the top of it into the parking lot or down to Federal at least. Has anybody never thought to break the NFL record on purpose? Deliberately stall it, get the ball to where it's, 1 yard past the record. Where are we at? 62, 63, somewhere in there. Get the ball to that spot, then basically run the drive out by throwing bad passes, whatever it takes, and then kick the record. Why don't they do that? I don't understand. I've been waiting for that record to be broken for years. People tie it seems like, every year. But come on, guys. When you're up 20 points, kick that 65-yarder. I wonder if you can do it from 70. God, wouldn't that be something?
I don't know. I've heard from, people, not me, because I don't have press credentials.
Can we please get press credentials? We're not really press. We're not interested in being press, but we just want to, I don't know.
Speak for yourself, sucker. I'll be press.
Now I'm depressed.
Now you're depressed, yes. But I've heard that, at practice, he regularly kicks in 60, 65 yarders. But also the practice balls are a little bit lighter, too. So.
And you don't have to kick over a defense that's 10 feet up in the air. So I don't know. I just, and it's just I think that's technically bad. I think that would be considered bad sportsmanship to run a play just to break a record. It's kind of cheesy, especially when you got a team beat like that. So I don't think you could ever admit to it, but it'd be kind of cool to see at least somebody try it once, coincidentally or not. Anyway, that's my advice to the Broncos.
Right, exactly. Break a record when you don't have anything better to do because you've got the opponents on the ropes.
Yes.
Well, speaking of on the ropes, we are way past out of time. So we'll see you next week.
Yep. And we'll talk about week 9.
Yes, week 9.